That's not me. I can tell me when I see me, and that wasn't me. Welcome everyone into the Nutmeg Tavern. We are live, and we're gonna have fun today because it's Friday and because we're in the Nutmeg Tavern, right? The weekend, it's almost here. It's time for having fun talking about 18th century stuff live. You just never know what's going to happen, but I don't think anything's going to catch fire as we're doing the live stream today. I hope not. Today I wasn't sure exactly what the topic was going to be earlier this week, and sometimes I just let things pop into my head, and ill-fitting shoes and shoes in general and how people wore them and the troubles they had with them, I thought was a perfect topic because we take shoes for granted. Let me tell you, we so take shoes for granted. When we read about what's happening with shoes in the 18th century, we find out that shoes were horribly expensive, they were ill-fitting, they didn't last very long, and so compared to today's shoes, which can last us forever, and we pay virtually nothing for them unless you're getting some fancy tennis shoe, and then you deserve it. Anyway, but thought we would have fun with that. Just a quick note, coming up on Sunday is the episode that we talked about last Friday, which was French bread. And that episode is coming up, and that'll be really good. And so let's get started talking about shoes. One of the things we sell are leather 18th century shoes made in the United States, buckle shoes, all that good stuff. The picture on the thumbnail was one of the pairs of shoes that I wear for, shooting videos, and it was all muddy and everything. And I thought it'd make a great picture. I've always liked that picture. I don't know why, but a pair of muddy shoes makes a great picture. But no matter what you do with those shoes, even though they're more kind of made in a modern sense on, say, modern machinery and all that, they still are not massively comfortable, although they're straight lasted. So shoes in the 18th century didn't a lot of times have lefts or rights. They just were the same shoe you wore on either foot there. They would slowly kind of form to your foot, unless, of course, you wanted them to last longer, and then you'd switch them back and forth. At least so the story goes. It's hard to find some, deep documentation on that sort of thing. Oddly enough, they don't talk about their shoes as much as you might expect them to talk about shoes. So I thought, before I, get into some of the readings, let's jump in and let's look at our pictures, and then I've got some particular things to talk about shoes, but let's look at some pictures of shoes and give us some visual context. The shoes are expensive enough that a lot of people, especially young people, are going around without shoes on. Poor people, people working in certain country settings, there's no reason to wear out a pair of shoes. So they're just go without. And so we have images of people that are shoeless going on in the 18th century. This person's we haven't seen this picture before. I'm not sure who the artist is.
I'm not sure either.
But very nice imagery with the raggedy clothes, and all the buttons seem to be missing. And there's one button at least. And these waistcoats got buttons, but obviously somebody, a little poor person. This is a later picture. The instrument totally caught my eye, and I just cannot get over this. We think this sketch is done about 1820. But that little, mini guitar ukulele looking thing.
Dad really wants one. You can tell.
It's just really hard to find anything like that that's in the 18th century. So I knew as soon as I saw it. It's kind of misdated on the site that we found it, being they labeled it as being done the year the artist was born. So that obviously isn't going to happen. So he was born in the 18th century, but obviously this instrument's pretty rare for that time period. Kind of shows up here in 1820, though. We're talking about shoes and barefootedness, so don't let me get all distracted by something in an image, which I am wont to do. The shoe maker, we have this is from Diderot's. Blow up from Diderot's showing people measuring. You see measuring the foot here. We see lasts on the wall. We see some finished postilion boots up on the shelf. And notice there's not a great quantity of equipment here. Basically, there's, some, the lasts themselves, and then people basically, we don't even see a large table for cutting the leather. So there's just a smaller table. The pieces of shoes aren't really big. They can be tough, but they're not really big. And so it's just a lot of knife work, a lot of hand work with awls and whatnot, putting together the shoes of the 18th century. Here are some of the kind of blow-ups of the Diderot's Encyclopedia, showing some of the tools, some of the finished boot and shoe sizes here, or kind of looks of the styles. Then we get some of the hand tools, cutting tools, nipping tools, and sewing tools. Notice there's like 6 different kinds of awls and sewing needles that you kind of get in there. And there's even figure 14 on the right side, which is the foot measuring device, which we still kind of see those sometimes today. Here's a leather ladies' shoe of probably the mid to early 18th century. The buckle is kind of a giveaway, and it's a very, very small buckle. And so later on, the buckles get really big. But this is probably fairly early style. You can see the latchets on these are much wider. These are men's shoes with red leather heels, which were kind of a fashion statement there in the early to mid 18th century. And going back to that, there are very, very few extant examples in museums of men's shoes from the time period. They are a rare thing, even though there were literally millions and millions and millions made, and then we have very few examples. There's some examples like this, and then a few sort of in archaeological digs where you find little pieces of shoe. But
and you do see women's, they tend to be saved a bit more because they would have been more decorated. And they'll have very specific cloth uppers and everything. Right. So you find a lot more examples of them. The men's shoes, they all got used up.
Yeah, and these would be very expensive shoes too. They're being the red-heeled shoes and whatnot. So but common, regular men's shoes, not so much. Here is an example of a portrait of the King of France with a very shapely leg and crazy red-heeled shoes with little buckles and all that. You talk about using them for dancing. It looks very dangerous to me.
Yes, that does.
So is this a shoemaker here? Is it?
I just actually picked this one for the wooden shoe.
Oh, for his wooden shoe. Oh.
He's actually, this is Dutch, and he's. I think he's counting the barley groats into the pail. And it's a proverb. It's just a picture of a proverb. But I picked it for the wooden shoes.
Wow. Yeah. And he's got a fish and a loaf of bread there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But wooden shoes, you can see those kind of have some kind of a liner in them. Sometimes they would have a woolen liner. And there were different kinds of wooden clogs and shoe-like items in Great Britain and in France and in different parts of Europe. So they have a kind of a different history, each one of them. Very interesting. These are patents that we see on the ladies. So in muddy weather, in snowy weather, they had these sort of what would you call them? Shoe extenders.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we have anything similar. Sometimes we'll use ice creepers.
Right.
Every once in a while.
Right.
And their streets were much dirtier than our streets.
Yes.
So you're wanting to get up off the mud.
And with not just dirt.
Yeah, yes.
So these you would be standing up 2 or 3 inches on this little metal platform, basically. And sometimes they were whole shoes. Other times they were just sort of like, buckle-on skates, right? Where kids' skates, you would kind of strap them on. So sometimes, and we've got an example here of, sort of like sandals, but your shoes would slip into those, and you can see how it kind of raises you up out of the mud. Although I'm sure it would still be very scary up
I
higher
know.
on those.
I'm sure you'd get used to walking in them, but they do look a little hard to walk into.
I'll bet no one is graceful.
Well,
walking
that's
in those,
that's
right?
true.
They look like
But worth it to keep your skirts clean.
right skirts and shoes cleaner. So there's these classic example you see in lots of different images of these postilion boots for post riders, basically, and they would have these giant heavy boots. I don't know how you would wear them. And you see that over and over again in.
And you start thinking, you're like, is this just a caricature?
Right.
Right. Especially the guy on the far right.
Right. But, there they are.
They're pretty hefty.
They're
looking.
hefty. And walking in them must have been something amazing.
Yeah, these sort of reminded me of ski boots in the sense that you're like, you're not really meant to walk in them. They don't.
You just kind of clunk along in them. It can't be very comfortable. We have kind of different shoes here. Again, we're looking for the shoes in this particular one, and we can see mules on the person sitting down. The maid person or the person who's serving, whoever that is, has, I think, tie shoes. And then even the child has little leather shoes. Surprised the dog doesn't have shoes on. There we go. We got them up closer here. So we can see the mules, which are like slip-on sandals, and then tie shoes over on the one side, and then the child has hopefully fairly soft-soled shoes over there. And there we are, back at the beginning. Did you want to jump in?
Yes, so there's a super chat here from Max Circle. Mm-hmm. Were there professions where someone was expected to wear shoes and professions where someone wasn't expected to wear shoes, or maybe it was not ideal to wear shoes, and specifically referencing sailors? Yeah.
There's conflicting sort of information on sailors, and you would think that it would be a situation where you would go barefoot a lot, but then you hear other references to where they would be wearing almost shoe wear that didn't make any sense. So in the late 18th century, men wore shoes and they would call them pumps. Don't ask me why. But they generally, as kind of the century goes on, the men's shoes get smaller and lighter and kind of fancier, and they would talk about these sailors, kind of climbing up into the rigging with these very inappropriate shoes. So I don't know about sailors and their shoes. That'd be an interesting study to try to hone that down, because it's not easy to get to sometimes. Look, there aren't a lot of images of sailors themselves close up enough, regular sailors, to see what's going on with footwear, but it would be a good study. The feet of sailors. And
now, there
yes.
are, one of the times you'll see people depicted as barefoot, and you can tell it's for their job, is when they're doing shore collection, like doing oyster hunting, or things like that, or the shrimp catcher. They definitely are going barefoot.
But there are fishermen's boots and sea boots that they wore also, sort of like wet weather boots. So we'd have to think about that one. It's a good question and interesting. And I think most of the time, unless they're in a situation like that, they're going to be wearing some kind of shoes, or else, maybe in an agricultural setting, they're not bothering to. But I think in most of the images we see people, if they're not in sort of raggedy muffin clothing, then they're probably wearing shoes. Was that it?
There were some questions. So some of them were answered in the chat. Somebody was wondering how common frostbite may have been in the time period.
I don't have a good answer on that one. That's probably an interesting. There's undoubtedly some medical writing, some scientific kind of writing that we could look for that. I don't know how you kind of see prevalences and understand that, because people don't write about that a lot, and it's hard to, quantify.
And then somebody was wondering if they had shoes with leather laces in them.
Not usually. There are lace shoes, but they seem to be like a cord or a ribbon sometimes, especially on women's shoes. I don't know about using leather thongs. I would say it would be likely because it can be so very, very strong. Yeah.
You do see the tie shoes from time to time. It's not as common as the buckles, but
right.
Definitely people will have the ties. And it seems to be more of a laborer thing.
Exactly.
Okay, I think I'm all caught.
Okay. So finding really interesting shoe writings can be a little, I kind of came up with my topic and then started doing the research, and it's like, okay, where am I going to find this? And, sometimes you got to, dig in the closets and to find what you're looking for. But I found a large set of shoe-related ideas in the dictionary of the vulgar tongue, which is a cant language dictionary, sort of slang dictionary of the 18th century. And I've got a few of them here that I thought were interesting. So, Kemp's shoes. Would I had Kemp's shoes to throw after you? That's Ben Jonson. Perhaps Kemp was a man remarkable for his good luck or fortune. Throwing an old shoe or shoes after anyone going on an important business is by the vulgar deemed lucky. But I think that varies a lot by culture. I think throwing shoes at people in other cultures isn't so lucky. Shoemakers' stocks. And this I found in another place also. So to be in shoemakers' stocks, new or straight shoes, I was in shoemaker's stocks, i.e. had on a new pair of shoes that were too small for me. So there are references, sort of idioms in the time period of ill-fitting shoes and the pain and suffering that goes on along with that. So you remember Crispin, right? Crispin from
St. Crispin's Day.
Yeah, St. Crispin's Day. Is that the Henry V?
Yes.
Okay. And I didn't understand this one, and he talks about it in the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. Crispin, a shoemaker from a romance wherein a prince of that name is said to have exercised the art and mystery of shoemaking, hence called the gentle craft, or rather from Saints Crispinus or Crispianus, who, according to legend, were brethren born at Rome, from whence they traveled to someplace in France about the year 303 to propagate the Christian religion. But because they would not be chargeable to others for their maintenance, they exercised the trade of shoemakers. The governor of the town discovered them to be Christians and ordered them to be beheaded about the year 303, from which they have been the tutelar Saints of Shoemakers. So that's from like 303. And then it gets, anyway, fun reference there.
If we remember, we listened to the Henry V speech on St. Crispin's Day.
Right. I thought it was odd that it was here in that. But patron saint of shoemakers.
Dad, could you move the candle that's in front of the mug a little?
I'm not kidding. It's not catching on fire. Somebody's.
Okay. All right. If you say
oh, there's this one over here.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Here's just a quick reference. Shoes were also termed flyers. So, like, I guess you could fly in them. You could, like, run fast, maybe. Affidavit men. Now, okay, here we go. Affidavit men. Knights of the post, or false witnesses, said to attend Westminster Hall and other courts of justice, ready to swear anything for hire, and distinguished by having straws stuck in the heels of their shoe. So if you see straw sticking out of the heel of their shoe, you know there's somebody you can get to lie for you in court. That was very odd. Square toes, an old man. Square-toed shoes being anciently worn in common and long retained by old men. And then hobnail, a country clodhopper from the shoes of the country farmers and plowmen, being commonly struck full of hobnails and even often clouted or tipped with iron. And here is, here they're talking about the clodhoppers and the farmers, country farmers, wearing these, armored shoes basically. And notice they're not going barefoot; they have shoes. Translators, sellers of old mended shoes and boots, between cobblers and shoemakers. So there's this whole kind of set of people, a range of people that work on shoes, repair shoes, make shoes, and they have their own kind of, it's like, I'm a shoemaker, don't bring me shoes to repair or something like that. Although that's different in different areas. A clout, I'll give you a clout on your jolly knob, and something, well, okay, and also, clouted shoes, being shoes tipped with iron. There we go. Apparently, crab shells are shoes in Irish. And then there's stampers, another term for shoes. Brogue, a particular kind of shoe without a heel worn in Ireland and figuratively used to signify the Irish accent because, of course, they're wearing those shoes. I didn't think about the idea that brogue the term, like the language, actually comes from brogue the shoe, which seems backwards. To coax a pair of stockings, to pull down part of the sock that's soiled down into the shoe to hide the dirty stocking or a hole in your stocking is called to coax. More shoes that are more sock related than shoes. Let me see if I can find. Yes, in miry times, this is a different book. In miry times of winter, they wore clogs, galoshes, or pattens. So we talked about that, wearing those special shoes. In Johnson's dictionary, there's a couple of terms. A galage, a shepherd's clog or wooden shoe, now not in use. And then there was an elsin, which is a special shoemaker's awl. And then there was one that was really kind of crazy. A different galosh, a wooden shoe or pattern made of all of one piece without any latchet or any type of leather, worn by the poor clown in winter. Again, talking about these sort of wooden shoes that some people, would say, what's going on there with that? There was something in here about a huckster with a wooden or with shoes, but I cannot read it. I blew it up trying to read it and I couldn't get it here. Also found a super interesting poem by John Gay in 1751. And there's two sections, there's two kind of poems. One's just got a short piece in it talking about, sort of bad things happening. And then there's two lines that say, should thy shoe wrench aside, down, down you fall, and overturn the scolding huckster's stall. So you got this shoe that's flipping off here. But he goes in for a much deeper piece here, and this is about implements for walking the streets and signs of weather. And this goes, then let the prudent walker's shoes provide, not of the Spanish or Moroccan hide. The wooden heel may raise the dancer's bound, and with the scalloped top his step be crowned. Let firm, well-hammered soles protect thy feet through freezing snows, rains, and soaking sleet. Should the big last extend the shoe too wide, each stone will wrench the unweary step aside. The sudden turn may stretch the swelling vein. Thy cracking joints unhinge and ankles sprain. And when too short the modest shoes are worn, you'll judge the season by your shooting corn. So he had fun with that one. So we talked about, somebody asked about medicinal things. What was that about? Oh, it was about frostbite. Here, this is in the scientific book, and it says, from shoemakers being obliged in the common method of making boots or shoes to do a great part of their work in a sitting posture with the shoe or boot pressing upon their stomach, very painful and fatal disorders have arisen. The society had already rewarded 2 machines invented to obviate in considerable degree the inconveniences when the superior merit of Mr. Strauss's machine induced them to also give him a reward. So that whole idea of, let's start to mechanize this and figure out how we can make it so that we aren't killing our shoemakers, because they're basically just kind of there is one tool you see in the paintings when you look closely, and it's like a leather strap that they put on their heel, and then they would go over their knee and they would trap the shoe that they're working on under that and kind of move their foot in a certain way, and it would basically trap that shoe onto their leg. But they're also kind of bending over and using their body to hold that, forcing the awls into the spots. It's very difficult work to do, especially when you don't have any tools. You're just sort of gripping it or doing that. And so here they're talking about these special shoemaker tools to hold the shoes down on benches and whatnot, so that the shoemakers don't die. Do you want to jump back in?
Sure. Okay. So here is a super chat from Speed and Style Tony. What materials were used in shoes other than leather? And in the chat, people have been talking about a specific, I believe it's birch bark ones that they'll have. Mm-hmm. And then in the women's shoes, there are a lot that have cloth as the upper portion.
And you have wooden heels and complete kind of sole sections that you might use at times. Modern shoes, even if they're leather, have a lot of layered components inside of them that you don't see. And it's kind of hidden under layers of glue and this and that. There are a lot of different little components to shoes that we don't see unless you individually tear a shoe apart or watch them being made. Those two guys that
so
repair
someone was
shoes-
mentioning that there are shoemaking
Right.
YouTube channels, and I believe it's Trenton and Heath.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah, Trenton and
I'll
Heath,
put it in.
that's fascinating. Watch them. It's like, okay, we're going to peel the heel off, and then we're going to take this cork junk out and do this and that. You're like, okay, that's nuts.
Okay. All right. And then I did want to mention that we had done previously a live stream on men's shoes specifically. So I'm
And a
gonna put
women's
some
shoes one.
men's
and-
shoes, and then a women's shoes one, and then there's also a video where Brandon is doing a shoe repair.
Right.
So let me grab those. And no, go away.
I can't go.
So here's Mr. Guppy with a super chat. I know somebody who wants collab at Tasting History, right? And then he said later that he had mentioned it in one of the in the comment section in one of the videos. And then I had dropped into the chat the link to the live stream where you guys were talking. It's not as much fun as a cooking collab, but geographically speaking,
Yeah.
a little easier to do. And then here's a super chat here from Hunter Hertzfeld. Were sandals common in the 18th century?
I have not seen a lot of sandals.
No. Sometimes you'll see some pictures of somebody mimicking Grecian.
Exactly.
And they'll be wearing sandals, but...
But that's sometimes just in portraiture, and they would do things in portraiture that they aren't wearing in real life. They're just mimicking the look. They'll just kind of throw some fabric on somebody, and it's just for a portrait. It isn't what people are wearing. So as far as I know, it's not common for people in Western Europe or North America in our time period. Now, obviously, people in North America are wearing moccasins, and you see that a lot. Like when Nicholas Cresswell's shoes wear out, and he's going into the woods, and he gets moccasins made.
He's going to need something.
That's right.
And then this one is from John Ogenes. Do you know of stories of people eating shoes during famine?
Well, somebody's reading ahead here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so I've got 3 or 4 readings here from the memoir of Joseph Plomartin, and he is talking about his time being a soldier in the Revolutionary War. The page is cut off because I didn't cut it. I didn't get everything here, but I hadn't had victuals in my mouth for 4 days and as many nights, except a little black birch bark, which I gnawed off of a stick of wood, if that can be called victuals. I saw several of the men roast their old shoes and eat them, and I was afterwards informed by one of the officer's waiters. Oh, I'll stop. I'm not going to read that part. So there they are in the Revolutionary War. And I don't think it's just totally, I think we could find a lot of different references to that, especially when you're at sea and, they run low on things and they eat whatever kind of leather things they have available to them. It seems extreme, doesn't it, to us today? But that's what it is.
So Lord Frederick says, I keep wanting to have a pair of shoes in a pot boiling away at an event.
Yeah.
That sounds like
it's almost done. Now, the Native Americans did something similar when sometimes they would go out on long hunting party situations. And they would just be gone for who knows how long, and they're traveling through complete wilderness, and they're traveling in such a way that they're trying to get to a place and come back. They're not just dawdling, doing hunting or whatever, and they would have mantles of like a hide, and they would take it off and cut off a piece and eat it. That's just seems very, very odd to us today. That's written more than once. Here's Joseph Plum Martin again. I, however, ventured to make use of $1 that evening and the next morning in purchasing some bread and cheese and a little something to wet our whistles with. I afterwards paid the man, and he informed me that the dollar did him more good than all the others. I had the day before this expedition put on a pair of new shoes, which, not having gotten fitted to my feet, caused blisters upon them as large as cents. And they were big cents, not tiny little pennies. So he's got ill-fitting shoes. Now he talks about, as a soldier, what they were supposed to get as soldiers. So they were otherwise promised, soldiers, the following articles of clothing per year: 1 uniform coat, a woolen and a linen waistcoat or a vest, 4 shirts, 4 pair of shoes, 4 pair of stockings and a pair of woolen and a pair of linen overalls, a hat or a leather cap, a stock for the neck, a hunting shirt, a pair of shoe buckles, a blanket. So this is a year-long ration of clothing here, I guess for lack of a better term. And they're getting 4 pair of shoes and 4 pair of stockings. Shoes are not lasting very long. These people, the soldiers, they're in wet weather, they're marching, they're doing, walking. And, in theory, the idea of going through 4 pair of leather shoes in a year is not crazy at all, right? Now, of course, he goes on to say, did I ever see this? No. But, that's poor Joseph Plum Martin. There's a section here, and this is printed rather small, so, but he's talking about going to a particular place. There's this island in the middle of the river that has a kind of a fortification on it. It's being bombarded by the British, and it's held by the Americans. And he is there. He says, it's November. Here I endured hardship sufficient to kill 6 heroes, no horses. Let the reader only consider for a moment that he will be satisfied, if not sickened, in the cold month of November, without provisions, without clothing, not a scrap of either shoe or stockings to my feet or legs, and in this condition to endure a siege in such a place as that was appalling to the highest degree. It's a mud island, it's got this fort on it, but you can't go into any of the buildings because they're being bombarded all the time, and so you just got to stand there in the mud and never sleep and don't have any food or any shoes or anything, and it's November. So that's Joseph Plum Martin. What does he know? While looking for a particular reference, I thought I was going to find it in one particular book, and lo and behold, after I searched through it and didn't find anything what I was looking for, I remembered what I was looking for was here in the diary of Matthew Patten. And the diary of Matthew Patten, this diary that we're speaking of, is his day book, where he puts all his sort of accounting and his day-to-day business things. It's got almost very few references to like family life, although this particular idea here, when I said shoes or shoe, I came up with 200 responses inside of the diary of Matthew Patten. Half of them, maybe slightly more than half of them, are talking about shoes for horses, but the other half are talking about shoes for his family. So this is his day book from 1754 to 1788. And he talks about, regular people's shoes like 80 or 90 times. So here are a few instances which I thought were very, very interesting. So he talks about this a lot. I took a side of leather and some horsehide to Sam Patterson to make a pair of shoes for my wife and for Susanna, and I took some of the invoice, probably money or whatever. That was the 3rd of that month. On the 17th of that month, I came home in the afternoon, and Sam Patterson brought home a pair of shoes to my wife and another pair for Susanna. And so, here it was, he took leather to a place, and 2 weeks later, he gets the shoes delivered. But there are other references where people come and stay at his house to make shoes for the family. And they'll stay for a period of time. And this happens multiple different times. Here is, this may not be a reference to that particularly, but I finished the leaf for a loom. I butchered a ewe that weighed 43 pounds, and Mr. William Goff came in the afternoon to make shoes at our house. And then, so then that was the 30th. On the 10th, Mr. Goff finished making shoes. This time he's made 9 pairs in all and has sold a pair for me and made a pair for each of the family except my wife and Susanna. And so there you go. He stayed there 10 days and made shoes for his family. And let's see. And he says, and we can't really use his reference too much for figuring out how much shoes cost, because there are very few direct money transactions that go on in this whole diary. He's constantly like, somebody made shoes for me 6 months ago and I paid some for them and I traded this and that got to, I mean, there's all these crazy monetary transactions that are going on because there is not a lot of ready, standardized money. He deals with 3 or 4 different types of money in this book, and he trades for stuff constantly. And again, this is New Hampshire from 1754 to 1788. So you can, I mean, you had to be good with your constant math and, making accounts to have any sort of, all these transactions going on and trading, and I'm not going to pay for this for 2 months. And, it's just nuts. I went to Londonderry and paid Alexander Stewart $5.50 for making 18 pairs of shoes for me last fall. And I returned him a pair of thick calfskin pumps. He probably means pumps. The spellings are not standard in here. That he made for myself, but they did not suit me, for which he is to make me a pair of his own leather and bring them to me next week. So you'll see this multiple times. People will make a pair of shoes for him, maybe for one of the boys, whatever, and then they don't fit, and they keep swapping it around, and it's like, oh, it ended up on somebody else. Apparently he had a bunch of kids, and so they needed a lot of shoes. Can you imagine, expensive leather shoes that you got, you're running through all the time. The kids are getting too big, and ugh.
Well, and as is commonly the case, I'm sure the youngest were in these families. They're like, all these kids they have, never anything new.
Yeah. Another thing happens in here is that he's switching shoemakers. So this is, it's going from 1754 to 1788. It's like a 30-year time period. But he talks at one point, it's like, I went to this guy's house to get him to make a pair of shoes, and I wasn't able to do that. And then like 2 days later, he's talking to somebody else about getting shoes made. So he goes through 3 or 4 shoemakers. But here, this is toward the end, probably right here in the 1780s. December 5th, our Robert began making shoes for us. So it's one of his sons started making shoes.
If you can't find one, you make one.
And you don't see any more references to shoes in the book.
It's like, finally, want something done?
You know what? I think I don't see my Patreon list, so we didn't get it. It's probably down on maybe. You can try. It might be in the printer. It might be on my desk.
You just look at the flat surfaces. Okay, so I have a couple questions here, and you're just checking. Somebody was wondering about fur-lined shoes or boots, if you'd run across any.
Well, there was that one picture of the person here. Let me get there. Come on, you can go there. Keep going. Oh no, you see his shoe there, his wooden shoe. There's some kind of lining thing. Now he's got a regular stocking that goes all the way up his leg, but there's a lining inside of his shoe. So yes, I think we could find that, and they talk about that. I think with moccasins also doing particular linings.
And we sell fleece, wool fleece liners, and they really do make the shoe much cozier.
They do.
And I'm certain you would want them in the wintertime. So somebody was wondering about, during the shoemaking process, if you had a sense of how long the lasted, right?
I think they can last a great quantity of time. Even though you hammer into them, sometimes, you nail, like you're creating the upper part. So let's say you don't have the sole yet. You cut the upper and you stretch it and nail it onto the last itself to, pull it down and shape it. And even though, you just pull those nails out and you just keep doing that, and they can last a great quantity of time.
And then they were also wondering about the concept of apprenticeship, how early someone might apprentice as a shoemaker.
It probably fairly early. The apprenticeships all seem to be, semi-standardized as early as 7, but usually a little bit later than that. No, I don't. Maybe I didn't hit the big P button to make it happen. So we'll just have to catch up with the brand new and returning YouTube members and Patreon folks, which again, super thank you to you folks for your great care of us.
I have a super chat here, and that it's from Speed and Style Tony saying a relative ate his shoes in Andersonville prison. So
yeah,
first-hand reference.
In that kind of setting, that's definitely one of those. It's like, okay, I got nothing else. Now, he may have wanted his shoes later on, but
it's like would prefer to have my shoes and eat them too. But
exactly.
Okay, I think I am mostly caught up, as far as I know. Oh, there was somebody who had a question here. Okay, whether we had touched on the really tall boots that you would see sea captains wearing, the really tall knee-high boots.
Yeah, you'll see it's fashion, sort of the height of the boots, and some riding boots in the time period, and it's probably the sea captains wearing a riding boot, right? Just fashionably. They also had, especially as you get into the 19th century, the half boots, which kind of more of a boot height that we're normally used to. Shoes definitely and boots kind of change around a lot as you get into that 1780s, 1790s, and then 1800. The fashion really changes a lot on shoes and boots.
Somebody was asking about the bread. Did you wave it around when you were talking about the no-knead bread? Okay.
Yes, that's a no-knead loaf from the episode. I've got a question for you guys. Has anybody tried to make portable soup?
Somebody was asking earlier. They're like, they were thinking about making it.
Yeah, there you go. I actually put off making the portable soup episode for a while because I was concerned about its difficulty, because I remember the difficulty from the first episode that we did, but I don't know. I didn't have quite as much. It's just super time consuming.
Maybe it was a good time of year because it was really dry.
Yeah. Quite possibly. But I didn't have as much trouble this time. It definitely is that last stage where it's getting goopy and you want it to get kind of hard and you need to dry it out. You do kind of, I don't know, just putting a fan on it really kind of helps. And if you got super dry air like we do here in the winter, because
it's been a dry winter.
Yeah, so you probably dry that stuff right up. So
Yes, it's Danny Atkins. So good luck with the portable soup.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll turn out delicious. Oh, and a couple different people had mentioned they made the candied citrus, which I thought was great.
Yeah, the candied peel is really just quite easy. There is no super magic tricks to it other than just like, take your time with it. And just keep boiling it and boiling it. And some people talked about not even bothering to soak it. It's like, just, do that.
Maybe if you have the right, I'm sure some fruit would lean more towards bitterness than others, but
exactly.
If you have the right fruit.
Yeah, it turns out really good. So too good, if you ask me.
It was quite delicious.
Yeah.
And it looks nice too.
Yeah.
Which, not all home-cooked food that tastes delicious looks delicious too.
Exactly.
So it's nice to have.
What, it doesn't look good? What are you talking about?
The bread looks great.
Yeah. No, the bread is really good. And
bit
it's
of butter
super easy to do. So make sure to check out that episode. I got to see the preliminary edit for it. It's beautiful. Good job, Aaron, like always.
Okay, we're all caught up.
Okay, we're caught up. We did it. We were here in the tavern. We talked about crazy shoe stuff the entire time. Always fun to come in and kind of dig in on a little topic and see sometimes how hard it is or easy it is, and always interesting to see where you find the most information. And I'm sure if I kept at it, I would find a whole new, vein of fun information. Maybe there's a shoemaker's book from the 18th century. I don't know. I doubt it. There just aren't as many of those kinds of things as you expect.
I didn't look at the Gentleman's Companion to see the Tradesman's Delight to see if it said anything.
I think it's just one of those, on those kinds of trades, they don't bother to write a book about it.
They just apprentice people. They're like, I'll just tell you.
Yeah, you go to the shoemaker and he says, well, this is how you do it. So now how Robert learned how to make shoes, I don't know. Maybe he was just hung around with these guys long enough. I mean, after all, they come to your house to make shoes, right?
Right.
So you can just watch the whole time.
What are you going to do? You'd hang around and watch him.
Just watch this guy for a week and then, give it a try. So anyway, thank you folks for all your care of us and your help with sharing videos and commenting on videos, purchasing fun merch items like these. Did we sell any of these really cool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those vanilla mugs, I want to drink out of it just because it looks like it would make things taste good. Anyway, thank you for all your care of us, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching.